It is my utmost pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker for this conference, Dr. Ole Schröder, the Parliamentary State Secretary at the German Federal Ministry of the Interior. We are extremely honored to have you here with us, Dr. Schröder, in Beirut, and we are eager to hear your perspectives and expertise on this critical topic. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Professor Vitry, Mr. Werner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for organizing this important conference. For us, as the German Ministry for Interior, it is of utmost importance to get a better understanding what is going on and what are the next steps. A few days ago, a blog in a major German newspaper bore the headline, "There is life after the Islamic State." The newspaper's correspondents described the first signs that there will be a new beginning in and around Mosul after the so-called Islamic State has been driven out. It's true, the IS is facing military defeat in one of its centers of power, and not only there, it is likely that the terror militia will be driven out of the area. It recently took over with such terrific speed. The caliphate proclaimed in 2014 could soon be defeated on the battlefield. The reign of terror in parts of Syria and Iraq could soon be over. But their foreseeable military defeat will not be the final victory over these terrorists and their inhuman agenda. Our fight against the IS and its terrorism will not end when the cities and territory it occupies in Syria and Iraq have been recaptured. I think we all agree about this fact. And the challenges will be no smaller, on the contrary, as you described it, Professor Vitry. We will all have to continue our joint efforts for a long time in order to permanently defeat the international terrorism of the IS and, of course, other groups. By we, I mean both the countries in the region which are directly affected and the international community, Syria and Iraq, and those countries where the IS has affiliates and wherever terrorists have infected people with their message of hate and contempt for humanity. The Federal Republic of Germany cannot stand by and do nothing in this struggle against terrorism. Also within the caliphate and its affiliates, we want to defend our free society. Nor can we allow the terror spread by the IS to cause people to avoid public gatherings or to avoid traveling to certain countries. And I think this is a very important point. The only way to protect our open society, even in Germany, and to secure that everybody is able to live their own life, is to fight the terrorism on all levels. Because the terror is very effective. People, for example, after the terroristic attack in Berlin, they don't want to visit crowds of people. They do not like to visit marketplaces. They choose other touristic destinations, for example. In this way, you see that the terrorism is infecting our life. In the next 20 minutes or so, I would like to tell you how Germany views the international dimension of the so-called Islamic State. 3 assumptions are decisive here. First, To deal with the threats of international terrorism, we must work together in the international community. Second, military action and law enforcement alone are not enough. We also need effective prevention to address the causes of the IS growth. Fighting and ultimately overcoming terrorism and extremism is a task for the entire society, and we must pursue this task also in the virtual world, in the internet. Second and third, in doing so, we need clear and convincing messages to counter the terrorist, extremist, and inhuman approach. Ladies and gentlemen, to briefly sketch out the German view of the IS phenomenon. The territory in Syria and Iraq occupied by the Islamic State is used to train terrorists in armed combat and to prepare attacks also in Europe. The devastating attacks in Paris and Brussels are tragic examples of their work. At the same time, by occupying territory, the IS was able to grow to a frightening extent. It collected taxes from the people living in the occupied territory and exploited the local resources. By the time the caliphate was declared in June 2014, the unprecedented success of its violent regime was attracting radicalized persons from all over the world. From Europe alone, roughly 5,000, mostly young people, traveled to the fighting in Syria and Iraq to join the IS. About 900 of them left from Germany. At the same time, like no other organization before it, the IS managed to package its horrific activities for media consumption. It broadcasts its highly professional videos practically in real time on countless internet channels. This is the secret to its enormous success. The IS was able to gain large numbers of sympathizers all over the world. Its professionally produced propaganda, which many find visually appealing, always has the same message. The West oppresses Muslims. Muslims can never be part of Western society. Muslims can be truly free only in a global caliphate. That is their message. In addition to its ideological elements, this propaganda, with its look of video games or action films, promises heroism and adventure. So it really fits in this digitalized time. But the IS media campaign not only attract fighters to Syria and Iraq, its global media presence has also led to further undesirable developments which are posing enormous challenges for us. First, IS propaganda is intended not only to entice people to move to its self-proclaimed caliphate. The IS is also increasingly pushing individuals to carry out terrorist attacks in their home countries. These lone wolves, as we call them, often become radicalized over the internet, unnoticed by those around them. Even their families do not notice the radicalization of them. The deadly attacks in Orlando and Nice, the attack on the regional train in Germany, and the attempted bombing of a music festival in southern Germany last summer all show that this strategy is working. It allows the IS to take credit for such attacks without even having to make any logistical effort. So it seems capable of striking other countries at any time. Such attacks are almost impossible to prevent. Second, in 2014 and 2015, the terror militia proclaimed a total of 20 provinces, so-called Vilayat. Most of these were regional jihadistic groupings which joined the IS and swore loyalty to its leaders. These groupings have almost no access to the core IS leadership. Only rarely do they control territory, and yet they support the claim of a global caliphate propagated by the IS. These affiliates also pose various threats to other countries. They can also serve as bases for preparing and supporting attacks in Europe. The IS affiliate in the Sinai Peninsula is directly next to Israel. The Vilayat Khorasan is an additional major threat to security in Afghanistan, and the most important affiliate of the IS is found in Libya. It has thousands of fighters and is further destabilizing this country, which has strategic importance for Europe. Also, if you look at the way the refugees are using at the moment. Third, fear of the Islamic State is causing more and more people to flee their homes. Of the nearly 1.5 million refugees who reached Germany in the past 2 years, many were fleeing the IS. But some of those, whom so many innocent people were fleeing, slipped into Europe on the wave of refugees. The attackers of Paris and Brussels gained combat experience in the so-called caliphate before returning to Europe disguised as refugees. The terrorist threat in Germany has cast new light on the refugee debate. It has been instrumentalized by right-wing groups for populist purposes. These groups increasingly equalized Islam and terrorism. The number of criminal attacks on refugee shelters has risen dramatically. The rise of right-wing populism in Europe is now threatening to undermine the European process of unification. Ladies and gentlemen, we must act decisively to counter all these developments with robust law enforcement by our security authorities and with effective prevention by strong civil society. Defeating the IS on the battlefield remains the top priority. The territory it occupies provides most of its financial resources, and its self-proclaimed caliphate provides the foundation of its claim to power. From its base there, it exports its terror using its slick propaganda and by sending terrorists on mission to other countries. In Germany's view, this creates a series of challenges. What will happen to the IS fighters? Where will they go? How can we detect and prevent their travel? How can we keep them from taking the armed struggle to other countries? And how can we keep them from continuing the armed struggle in their countries of origin, for example, through terroristic attacks? What will the strategy for the IS be after the end of the caliphate? Where will it get its funds? What media strategy will it pursue? Will it keep trying to polarize societies? How can we keep murderous groups like the IS and its affiliates from forcing hundreds of thousands to risk their lives fleeing their homes? The security authorities are intensively studying all these issues. We will have to accept the fact that Europe will continue to face serious challenges. Highly radicalized, violent foreign fighters with combat experience could return to Europe. This could stretch our security authorities to the limit unless we develop ways to deal with these fighters ahead of time. We must assume that when the caliphate collapses, women and children who did not actively fight for the IS will return to Europe. De-radicalizing them will be a major challenge for all of us. The IS will probably try even harder to smuggle terrorists into Europe and to encourage supporters to carry out individual attacks there. Countering this threat will require alert, well-occupied and networked security authorities. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, we must deal with all these challenges. First of all, on national level, the attack near Würzburg in southern Germany in July 2016 left 5 people seriously injured. That was the first attack in Germany for which the IS officially claimed responsibility. Less than a week later, the first bombing was carried out in Germany, in Ansbach, also in the southern part of the country. The IS also claimed responsibility for this attack. 15 people were injured and the bomber was killed in the explosion. Both attackers in Würzburg and Ansbach came to Germany as refugees seeking protection from war and persecution. These attacks made something clear to us. Members and supporters of the IS are willing not only to follow the organization's agenda, they are also willing to carry out attacks within the Federal Republic of Germany. Most recently, the attack on the Christmas market in Berlin on 19th of December, the 20-year-old Tunisian Anis Amri drove a truck into the middle of a Christmas market next to the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church. He killed 12 people and injured more than 60. The victims were not only Germans but also from Italy, Israel, the Czech Republic, Poland and Ukraine. Visitors from the US, the UK, Spain, Hungary, Finland, Lebanon were injured, some of them seriously. Anis Amri came to Germany as a refugee in 2015 too. More than ever, these tragic attacks in our own countries have moved us to take action. International terrorism does not stop at national borders. Each country is responsible for taking the necessary measures at home. In Germany, we have done this on several levels. We are a federal state, as you know. We have amended our legislation in order to better apprehend and prosecute terrorists and to make it more difficult for them to travel. We have significantly reinforced our security authorities with more staff, bigger budgets and more legal powers. I'm confident that we in Germany are well prepared in the fight against terrorism in terms of security authorities and prevention. But that alone is not enough. Terrorism is international. The IS is the best example for that. And it's obvious that we in Europe and around the world must work closely together in view of this multifaceted threat. What good is it to identify terrorists traveling around Europe if they can cross our open borders without being detected? or if they are not recognized when entering or leaving the Schengen area because we haven't shared information with our partners. How can we succeed if we do not share information about a specific situation or measures that have been taken and develop coordinated approaches? Within Europe, we are defending our free societies with a package of what I believe are effective measures. If necessary, these measures can also be applied to global cooperation. For example, we have adjusted our border controls. We are making progress in the fight against terrorist financing and in regulating firearms. Cooperation, coordination, and intensified measures to counter Islamist terrorism must not be limited to Europe. Bilateral and multilateral cooperation is also important. We already have some institutions we can use to make progress at international level. We already have comprehensive international regulation on and an institutional framework which I believe largely cover the various aspects of counter-terrorism. I'm thinking in particular of the United Nations and Comprehensive Security Council resolutions with strict measures concerning the IS, Al-Qaeda and persons associated with them, foreign terrorist fighters and the fight against terrorist financing. Second, in addition, the Financial Action Task Force sets standards for its members which will allow us to cut off the terrorist sources of funding. Third, the Global Counter-Terrorism Forum and the Coalition to Fight the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant are working closely together on counterterrorism. And fourth, counterterrorism is also a high priority in other forums such as G7, NATO, and the OSCE. Along with strategic efforts in the international forums, it is especially important to share operational information and knowledge to specific developments and threats. With all these things, it is crucial that we also carry out what we have agreed. The counterterrorism activities agreed in the international forums must better be coordinated. Information sharing must be improved further, both of national level and international cooperation. We will achieve lasting success only if we focus on prevention as well as law enforcement. Civil society's actors can often be much more effective than government actors in reaching the public. And therefore, we need strong partners in civil societies and strong non-governmental organizations. So a key element of our efforts must be to strengthen civil society. We will also work to make sure that universal human rights and the rule of law are upheld in the fight against terrorism. But it's not enough to fight terrorism. We must change the social and political conditions which made it possible for the IS to gain power, which result in mass flight. Germany has increased its strong commitment to development cooperation in recent years. This year, the federal government will invest more than 7 billion euros in removing the causes of flight, and we will remain committed. We are seeking direct dialogue with the countries affected in order to find out how we can help. To mention one specific example connected to the collapse of the self-proclaimed caliphate in order to restore the state and civil security, to support the process of reconciliation and enable internally displaced persons to return to their homes. Last year, the Federal Republic of Germany invested 41 million euros only in Iraq. However, this all depends on destroying the caliphate and liberating the territory occupied by the IS. This is why Germany is meeting its growing international responsibilities also in military terms. Since September 2014, the Bundeswehr, our federal armed forces, has been member along with 65 other countries of the international coalition to fight the IS. It operates a training mission in Iraq and conducts flights to help the conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope there will soon be a life after the IS for the people of Mosul, a life in peace and freedom, but the international community continues to face major challenges. The IS will have to change its strategy. Its fighters, most of them highly radicalized and battle-hardened, will want to return to their home countries or head for other crisis regions. We can only imagine how this will impact the national and international security situation. And I'm sure that the idea of the IS and its barbarous ideology will live on after its caliphate has ceased to exist. To defend our liberal democracy, we must fight not only the symptoms of its evil, but also its roots. In 6 panels held today and tomorrow, you will address all these international dimensions of the terror militia, its affiliates in the Middle East, North and West Africa, ISIL, Khorasan province, and the IS network in Europe. With this conference, you will make an important contribution to understanding the strategy of these terrorists after the fall of their self-proclaimed caliphate, and thus to fighting the IS and its ideology. In conclusion, I would like to stress once again that we can only achieve this together in the international community with a combination of law enforcement and prevention, with a consistent message and with joint efforts by the government, research community and civil society. Fighting and ultimately overcoming terrorism and extremism is a task for the entire society of every country. And with this in mind, Germany will continue to play a very active role at the international level, and we feel very much responsible for this issue, and we will even be more active in the next years, and therefore this conference is of utmost importance for us to get a better understanding of this issue and to come in context to all important people doing research regarding this issue and feeling responsible for this important task. Therefore, thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for playing such an important role in this conference.